Hello everyone, welcome to Bit of Anatomy. In today's tutorial, we will see the features of implantation. So if you have not watched the previous videos of embryology, I have left the link in the description, and also you can see a link in the I button in the upper left corner. So you can see the process of fertilization. So in this we will see the what do you mean by implantation, or in simple terms we call this implantation as embedding process. So if you appreciate, so the fertilization occurs in the region of ampulla of the uterus, and gradually the zygote will move along the uterine tube or the fallopian tube, where it undergoes various stages of cleavage division and it forms the morula, and later it forms the blastocyst, and that blastocyst will reach the uterine cavity. So once it reaches the uterine cavity, for further development, it can't develop within the uterine cavity. It has to be embedded within the wall of the uterus, within the endometrium of the uterus. So this process where the blastocyst will enter into the uterine wall, into the endometrium of the uterine wall, it is called as the implantation process. So what all things we should know in the chapter of implantation is, so what is the normal site of implantation, what is the process of implantation, and what are the abnormal sites or ectopic implantation or abnormal sites of the implantation. So these are the various subheadings that you should know under the implantation process. So if you see what is the normal site of the implantation, usually implantation occurs as I have shown here at this junction. So what is this junction means? This is the junction of posterior wall of the uterus with the fundus of the uterus. So this is the normal site of implantation. Anyhow, the implantation that occurs anywhere in the upper part of the uterus, it is considered as normal implantation. Whereas if it occurs in the lower part of the uterus or in the cervix, it is again belong to one of the abnormal type of implantation. So now if we appreciate process of implantation, so we will see what changes occurs in this region, what changes occurs in the uterus, what changes occurs in the blastocyst, and how the blastocyst will enter into the uterine wall. So first, if we appreciate the changes towards the endometrium. So in the endometrium, so as you all know, it will be in the secretory phase where there are numerous glands, so which are sawtooth in appearance, and this whole epithelium is lined by simple columnar epithelium which forms the endometrium here. So there will be numerous uterine glands, so which are a sawtooth in appearance or corkscrew appearance because of the proliferation of the uterine glands. So these changes, they occur during secretory phase of the menstrual cycle. And what is the function of this uterine gland means? They will start secreting the substances which nourishes the developing embryo in the initial stages. Apart from this, within the stroma of the endometrium, there are some changes that are occurring in the cells. So the cells which are initially very small, they will gradually increase in size and they will start to accumulate. So this increase in size is because they get filled up with glycogen and lipids. So these cells, they are called as decidua cells. And this process, it is called as decidual reaction. Again, what is the function of this deciduous cells means since it stores glycogen and the lipids, their major function is again to nourish the growth and support the growth of the implanting embryo. So these are the changes that occurs within the endometrial layer. So the entire endometrium we call it as deciduea. So why it is called as deciduea? It is similar to the deciduous forest which sheds off the leaves. This deciduea, if there is no fertilization and no implantation, then it is shed off during each menstrual cycle. So that's why it is called as the deciduea layer. So these are the changes that occurs in the endometrium. So now we appreciate the blastocyst or the embryo part. So if you appreciate the blastocyst, so it basically contains an outer layer, so which is called as zona pellucida, a protective layer. And within the zona pellucida, now the blastocyst is modified into two layers, an outer layer of cells which is known as the trophoblast, and towards one end there will be group of inner mast cells which is called as the embryoblast. And this cavity, as you all know, it is known as the blastocele. So these are the parts of the embryo or parts of the blastocyst we can appreciate: the zona pellucida, trophoblast, embryoblast and the blastocele. So in the initial stage of implantation, gradually the zona pellucida will disappear. So it occurs by around 5th day after the fertilization. So the zona pellucida will disappear gradually and eventually only the trophoblast and the embryoblast layers remains, or only the blastocele without any coverings will come out of the zona pellucida. So this process where the blastocyst will come out of the zona pellucida, this we call it as hatching of the embryo. So once the trophoblast comes out of zona pellucida, it comes in contact with the uterine endometrium. So there will be substances released both by the uterine endometrium and also the trophoblast layer, so which is species specific, and there will be interaction between the various proteins and the receptors, and the entire trophoblast will get attached to the uterine endometrium. So there will be adhesion of the polar trophoblast with the uterine endometrium. So for this adhesion, there will be secretion of a chemical substance from the uterine epithelium which is called as pentasaccharide lacto N-fucopentose 1. So this is released from the uterine endometrium or the epithelium, and corresponding receptors which is species specific is present in the trophoblast cells. So that will aid the attachment of both these layers. At the same time, the trophoblast will release some hyaluronidase enzymes which will rupture a part of the uterine endometrium. So there will be small gap that occurs in the uterine endometrium because of the enzymes released from the trophoblast and even from the endometrial layer. So once a small part is damaged, gradually the entire blastocyst will start entering into the uterine endometrium. So this process is called as implantation. So further what happens? The entire blastocyst is present within the uterine wall, and the gap or the part of the endometrium which is ruptured, so it will be initially filled by the fibrin plug which is gradually replaced by the endometrial layer. So these are the various processes that occurs in the implantation process. So changes in the uterine wall, where the glands are already formed in the secretory phase. There will be decidual reaction in the stromal cells, where the cells will accumulate glycogen and the lipids. And in the blastocyst, the zona pellucida will gradually disappear. So this disappearance of the zona pellucida, it is assisted by some substances like trypsin like enzymes, which will dissolve or which will digest the zona pellucida, and the entire blastocyst will come out of the zona pellucida, a process called as the hatching, and there will be interaction within the epithelium of the uterus or the endometrium and the trophoblast. Various enzymes and receptors will act here, and gradually the blastocyst will enter into the uterine wall. So this process is called as implantation. So now if we appreciate abnormal sites of implantation. So normal site, as we already saw, it is at the junction of posterior wall of the uterus and also the fundus of the uterus. So if you see the abnormal sites of implantation, so this is the normal site, and anything, as I said, above the upper part of the uterus is also normal site of the implantation. So implantation can occur at various regions. So sometimes there could be implantation within the ovary itself. So this is one abnormal site of the implantation. So not a common one. Very rarely it occurs, and sometimes the tumors occur in the ovary, which are called as ovarian tumors, or which are called as the teratoma. So where some of the germ cells will form and some of the tissues are found within the ovary. So the normal site of fertilization is ampulla. The formed embryo might not travel through the uterine cavity to reach the uterus. It might implant within the uterine wall itself. So this is one more site of abnormal implantation. So what is the risk here if there is any implantation in the uterine tube? So it will embed into the wall of the uterine tube, and since the wall of the uterine tube is very thin when compared to the uterus, it can't bear the pregnancy for a longer period of time. So the embryo will definitely grow for a certain period of time, but after that, since the muscle wall of the uterine tube is weaker when compared to that of the uterus, so it will rupture. So this is an surgical emergency. If it ruptures, there will be a lot of bleeding might happen, and which might also lead to death of the individual. So it is a surgical emergency where it should be removed completely. So that is one more site of abnormal implantation. So sometimes what happens? So instead of traveling in the direction of the uterus, the embryo might travel in the opposite direction and end up getting implanted in the abdominal cavity or in the peritoneal cavity. So there also the development can occur for a certain stage. Usually the embryo will die off if it gets implanted here, but sometimes it can develop for a certain stage. Again, the risk of excessive bleeding and death of the patient can occur. So that is one more site of abnormal implantation. So out of all these, abnormal implantation is more common in the uterine tube. So these are very rare types of implantation. So all the abnormal implantation can occur within the uterine wall if it occurs in the lower part of the uterine cavity. So what happens if it occurs in the lower part of uterine cavity or even in the cervix part of the uterus? So it will obstruct the internal os here. So it will overlap the internal os. So the development will occur normally if the implantation occurs in this region, but there will be difficulties during the normal delivery process. So these are the various sites of abnormal implantation, and these are the various things that you should know in the implantation: the site, the process, and the abnormal sites of the implantation. Do subscribe for future updates. Thank you.